Hello there. Welcome to yet another show with which is Dreamers and Unicorns. This is a place where we meet some really super interesting people, and the person I have as my guest today is exactly one of them. Um, I met her when I joined PepsiCo. So this was the early days when I joined PepsiCo, and she had just joined from Unilever. And in a very, very short while, we became really good friends, and I started to find my conversations with my friend Kimsuka Narsimhan, who's today's guest, really, truly illuminating, and just the sheer breadth of knowledge about so many things. I just couldn't resist the temptation of bringing her onto the show. Just to give you a quick, background in terms of what Kim has done. She spent uh, almost 3 decades in consumer goods, which is really what we are going to focus on, specifically two or three categories that we are going to talk to her about. But then you have, she started off her career with Unilever as a finance person, and then became the CFO at PepsiCo India, did a regional role and global role, and then of course she joined Kimberly-Clark as the Asia Pac CFO. And there is a small secret life that Kim leads as a fiction writer, which also we should mention here. She's got a book which she's written. We should probably start with that. Kim, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Abhijit, for having me. It's going to be great. Looking forward to chatting with you.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about that fiction book that you wrote? And are you writing anything else now?
I will if you promise to publish it.
Okay, all right. We'll get started today on a little bit about two or three categories. Kim, what are some of the categories we should focus on? I was just thinking we should do potentially beauty, food, and health as three categories that we should learn from you about. Is that reasonable? Do you want to add something else to that?
No, I'm good. These are three categories I've worked in at various points of my career. So happy to exchange thoughts on all three.
All right. So, how has the pandemic impacted you personally? What did it mean for you? We'll talk about business later, but in terms of your impact for you.
Well, I was locked down in my place for a good 4 months away from my family. So I learned to tolerate myself for that long, so which is quite an achievement. So it gave me a chance to get reacquainted with myself. So yeah, that was the number one discovery of the pandemic for me.
What did you learn about yourself?
I think that's a subject matter of another longer chat. But let's say I like some things, I didn't like many things. I'm in the process of fixing a few things that I didn't like.
Okay, all right. I'm going to start by asking you about what are some of the trends in consumer buying which got changed because of the pandemic. If you sort of talk about the three categories, beauty, food, and health, what would you say has been the impact of the pandemic?
It's very interesting that the pandemics impacted consumption patterns. I think some of the impact perhaps could be short term, and some of them are here to stay. If I take health and hygiene, which is a category that I currently work in, the awareness of hygiene has obviously spiked hugely during the pandemic. You know, the number of times we've all washed our hands and used sanitizers and so on has gone up hugely. But as a kind of almost side effect of this is possibly here to stay for a while. So every time you step out and come back, I think we'll automatically go wash our hands, and the consumption of items like wet wipes, antibacterial wipes, hand sanitizers, and tissues, and so on, is going to possibly go towards a higher level of per cap consumption and stay there for the foreseeable future.
And when you think about, categories such as food, what has changed and what is likely to, just be a temporary swing and then back? How would you distinguish the two?
Well, as an observer and a consumer of the foods category, I think a couple of things are very clear. How people behave when they are at home is a little different from when they're out of home. So, obviously, the opportunities for out of home are significantly reduced with the restricted movement and restricted travel and so on. Obviously, nobody's taking out big hampers and going on picnics anymore, or even going out for an odd ice cream or a cold drink, which is quite common in India. On the other hand, if you're stuck at home for long hours as a family, we tend to snack more. So while the consumption of on-the-go beverages and food items may have gone down, possibly the consumption of snack items and the obvious delivery of pizza and such like has gone up. So that's a very kind of almost a snap or a superficial observation, but from that you can derive various other points of view as well.
Would you say that the concern that people have about physical safety, sanitization, and all that, would that result in people buying more of the snacks, or will they move to healthy snacking or avoid snacking? Where do you see it moving?
I think it's an interesting point because again it's a bit of a layered answer. So packaged foods obviously have come into their own. At the start of the pandemic, you saw a lot of people stocking up on cans and packages of both cooked, ready to eat, and raw material for food. So, and this is in an era where packaged foods and canned items and so on have come in for their share of criticism. Yeah. So it was just the availability and the fear that you're going to have to go without that spurred a huge spike in purchases of these items. And then you move to a slightly different zone where you felt that packaged food was safe, yeah, had less, perhaps interactions with possible sources of infection. So you were happier to pick up packaged foods for that reason. Then there was received wisdom, and the learning about the pandemic kept kind of evolving and changing. So there was received wisdom that maybe food items were not a big conduit of infection. So people started letting their guard down, their so-called guard down, and going in for various kinds of food items, including from the dhaba next door. And we all convinced ourselves that it was perfectly safe. And of course, there were plenty of tips to say that you could nuke the germs or the bacteria or whatever out, popping it into the microwave of the oven or so on. So we did that as well. So our understanding, our familiarity, and our comfort with various forms of food kept changing and evolving.
Is that driven more by the fact that there is fatigue, that people are tired of keeping their guards up, and therefore the fatigue leads them to be more callous? And is that going to show up in either health or food or beauty?
I think yes, yes to all. There is a fatigue factor, and that's manifesting itself in different ways. One could be that you're letting your guard down. The other could be the famous revenge buying that you're seeing in countries like China, where we believe that the virus is in retreat. So, yes, it's manifesting itself in very different ways. It's unnatural for people to hold themselves back for a very extended period of time.
So would it mean that we are likely to see the buying patterns back to normal? As the vaccine rollout happens, would that get mirrored in the recovery of the economy? Would you say that? Is that how it will be?
There's certainly a factor of pent up demand which is going to play out, and how that will play out will depend on how people shop, the channels they shop in from, and also how much money they're going to have. Let's not forget that it's not been an easy ride for many people. Yeah. So jobs have been lost, have been slashed, and so on. So the amount of money jingling in one's pocket has been impacted. So consumption is going to reflect that.
And when you think about marketing, one of the questions we have from Ketan Satyavali, this question is, how is marketing going to be reconceptualized as the new normal in 2021? What is your view?
I think the basics and the fundamentals of marketing will not dramatically change, but we do have to consider the whole digital aspect, and that will has obviously been a trend that's been accelerated hugely. So it's not that at the start of the pandemic, the digital world was it was something new, or marketing in a digital world was unknown. It's just that probably 3 years of evolution have been compressed into 6 months. And you have, Abhijit, written about it fairly extensively in your book. So I'm sure you have a thought or two to add to that acceleration trend.
No, I think one of the questions I had when I was writing the book is this a moment where we are going to see, traditionally FMCGs have sold to the distributor and then through the market to the consumer. But in the process, the data which is there of consumer buying, with the kind of immediacy, let's say, which an Amazon has, that's really something that FMCG companies have not had, because it sort of gets twice removed in some sense. They of course invest heavily in market research, but is that going to get changed? Because when you move to digital, digital buying patterns really start to, you get a lot more data, and that can drive your decision making in a far more granular fashion. Would you see that happening?
Yes, indeed. I think for a start, the amount of money that the FMCG companies are spending on digital marketing versus more traditional media like television and print have completely inverted in favor of obviously digital. So that's one clear outcome. And the second is that it's also a question of relevance to the product category, yeah, and also how consumers are buying, shopping, etc. So if you're, it's back to the principle of fishing where the fish are, or in this case, fishing where the fish shop. So if it's going to be an e-com led evolution or revolution, then you need to be there.
I don't know whether you use the fish example because of the stereotype of Bengalis being, fish lovers, etc. I don't know whether your example had anything to do with that. Maybe. What, Kim? Was it driven by that?
Of course, always at the back of my mind.
Okay, I'm going to switch to a different segment. I'm going to talk about the impact of the pandemic in the workplace. What do you see are some of the things which right now, we are looking at a hybrid world where it is potentially going to be partly in the office, partly remote, and we are going to kind of see that. Does it change the way people manage teams? How does that change? What is the biggest piece which is overlooked in this whole process?
I think it's interesting that you raise it because obviously the models of work have changed quite dramatically, even in the 10 months that we've seen following the pandemic. What we thought couldn't work, which is a bunch of people working from remote locations, being managed remotely, being motivated in a very different fashion, coming together to produce an outcome which we earlier thought could only happen if we worked physically in the same spot. So that's been a big kind of eureka for all of us. So given that, how do teams how are they likely to be managed in the future is an interesting question. I think it'll hark back to what would be the hierarchy in a workplace. Yeah, when you look
Hmm.
ahead. So, is it just
Hmm.
going to be somebody who is sitting on top of a bunch of people supervising? Is it going to be people brought together by a clear deliverable who don't really need that kind of traditional supervision anymore? Because there are built-in checks and balances. If you take something like a shared service center, there are enough tangible measures of outcomes to make a live supervisory layer almost redundant. Yeah. So if
Hmm.
you were a team of that kind, would you really need a supervisor, a bunch of supervisors to, let's say, produce an outcome like closing of the books or completion of a sales call?
So is it going to impact different functions in the organization in different ways or at different levels? Meaning to say that, would you say that it would impact the finance team in a different way as compared to, let's say, the marketing team? Would it play out like that?
I think it's more about the task than the function. And I think you made a reference to it in your book as well. If there is something which is rule based, then it stands to reason that it can be automated, the outcome can be measured, and there is less of a need for human intervention, human supervision, and so on. But if there is something which is much more intuitive, ad hoc, is one of requires interaction, applying, should we say, experience and knowledge, which hasn't recurred continuously in a pattern in the past, then hopefully some of our jobs will still stay.
One of the hypotheses I've put across in the book is that I think we are going to see people having to learn to deal with emotions in the workplace, because emotions have traditionally been kept at home. And we've said that the workplace is built on logic, and, you don't really bring the emotional part of you into the workplace. Now, when work is moved home, are we going to play by the rules of the office, or is it going to be um, things that were kept at home are going to impact the workplace? How would you view it?
I think really the lines have gotten completely blurred, right? So one
Mm.
example is I'm sitting in my living room, you're sitting in your study, stoke your living room, and they are they are what they are. Yeah. So I'm sure all of us have attended meetings where we've said there's no point in getting into formal gear and a jacket because we are not in that kind of atmosphere, and there's no point in pretending to be that. So throughout the last year, we've had instances of kids climbing on to their parents' laps, pets walking all across the console. Yeah, the sound of kitchen stuff happening, cookers whistling in the background. We've had it all, and none of us has really turned a hair over it. I mean, it's just part of the landscape. So I think we've become comfortable with that in a surprisingly short period of time. So, and I think it's because all of us have been in the same situation. So think about it. There's a board meeting happening, and out of 10 members, 4 people are sitting in the office, all dogged up in jackets and formal wear, and the rest are sitting at home. Yeah. So then it's a curious mix and match. And the people who are not around the table feel that they're not really part of what's happening. But if everybody is sitting in their respective homes and everybody is being casual, but still focusing on what needs to be done, then it's a very different thing. Then you just let go of all the kind of fripperies and everything else, and just focus on the central theme being discussed. I
There's
don't
a
know if
question
you read.
from, sorry, go ahead.
Now I was saying I don't know if you resonate with that thought.
I think it is going to be that you will see people getting comfortable with these kind of blurred lines, between what work where versus work timings versus holidays versus free time. So it's all of that. And I think we are now swinging in that sort of zone where that equilibrium has yet to be defined, which is that, people complain about the workday being infinitely longer. So those are some of the things which I think will get settled once people start to think about, because behavior changes a lot when you think about something being for the short run and something which is going to be there for a much longer span of time. Our adjustment rates change. We have a question here from Aditya Mishra, who says that some people say that there should be equal weightage for following the processes and the results, but going forward, should there be 70% weightage for results and 30% for following the process? Or, would you find a different percentage mix? What would you say?
Well, so my question back to both you and Aditya would be, why would the pandemic or otherwise impact processes? The steps, the way we engage with the process could change, but the process itself has been put in place for a bunch of checks and balances, I would assume. Yeah. So shortchanging the process, will it not impact the outcome? And if it does, then the answer is clear, stick to the process. If it doesn't, then you should kind of right size the process, change the process, course correct the process anyway, irrespective of pre or post pandemic,
Kim,
would
I
be
have
my.
a question for you. My question for you is, a little bit of a spin-off from this question that Aditya asked, which is that when you identify high potential people in your team today, let's say working in this virtual environment, would the method be different? Would you get impacted by different factors as compared to what it was like when you had everybody co-located in the office? Does that change the way we identify top talent?
Not necessarily. I think earlier maybe mobility, willingness to work outside of one's location was a factor in determining top talent, especially for countries with global ambitions. I think with WFA, WFH, and so on, that's become dramatically reduced in importance. I would say that is a big factor. Otherwise, flexibility, the inclination to kind of experiment, learning, those continue to be at the heart of talent.
And what is, when you interview people for your team, what is the one thing that if the person did not have it would be a deal breaker? I'm going to assume that everybody has this necessary qualifications. So that's not a reason to filter out. If it is not that, what is it that you would look for specifically in the team, and how would you assess that in an interview?
So for me, it's all about attitude. I think skills and everything else can be learned, but there's no substitute for the right attitude. And almost 50, 60, and sometimes up to 90% of the hiring decision is based on the attitude of the person at every level.
Just break it down for me and tell me, what do you mean? what do you see in an interview which tells you about the attitude of the person? Tell me a little more about that.
I think it's a combination of leaning in, curiosity, empathy, um, engagement. Yeah, these are like humility, by the way, because I think the that's in very many cases the start of the learning process. I don't know, and I would like to know more, rather than I know everything, hire me. Yeah. So for me, those are the different facets of attitude.
And how do you assess somebody's ability to take on larger roles in future? So do you assess for potential at the time of hire, or do you kind of observe the person on the job and then take a call about the future? How does it play out in your head?
We make judgment calls on potential at time of hiring, but I think I would definitely want that judgment call to be kind of vindicated by the person's performance. So, as you say, a potential without performance is kind of not exactly the space you want to be in.
Sure, sure. So, which means that there is necessarily a time factor before you would, take a bet on that person for a larger role, and maybe. So, what is your philosophy? Do you feel that if you drop the person at the deep end of the pool, the person picks up faster, or is it that you kind of believe in day-to-day coaching and then taking the person along, till they start to learn how to swim in the deep? What is your take?
I think if a person is 60, 70% ready, and there is a top up by way of the attitude that we were talking about, then that person becomes eminently coachable. Yeah. So I think we should all be happy to take a bet on a bundle like that.
When you think about the whole thing of the pandemic, some of the sectors which have been very badly impacted, whether it's education, you look at hospitality, whether you look at textiles, fashion, these are all, these are all sectors where you've traditionally seen a lot more women employed. Um, and when you do a sort of a scan across sectors, do you feel that women are worse impacted in this kind of a scenario of the pandemic, or it's unfortunately the same for both? How would you view it?
I think there is a challenge and an opportunity. The challenge could be a sectoral one, which you said. The opportunity that I see is with the flexibility on location free jobs and so on. I think women really can do a lot. There's this whole thing of child care, taking care of the home, of elderly relatives, etc., etc. Now suddenly loses its being tied at home factor. Yeah. So with a
Hmm,
little bit
hmm.
of organization, it's possible to juggle all of this because two things. One is you're on the spot, and the second is you're saving the time of commuting and of prepping to go somewhere, etc., etc. So I think in many ways it should benefit women.
So when you view yourself, would you prefer to be described as a woman leader or just a leader? I mean, so do you prefer to be called a woman CFO, or would you say you're a CFO? How do you view it?
Um, I think I am a CFO who's a woman. Yeah. There I will not qualify either in the sense I don't think I'm a better CFO or otherwise because I'm a woman. And but I agree. that for women doesn't certainly impact the way I function as a CFO or anything else. So both parts of the statement are true, and I don't know which influences the other more.
So, we've often seen that one of the big challenges that organizations face, and this is one of the topics on which you've spoken quite extensively about, building a pipeline of women leaders. And I'm just very keen to ask you the most obvious question is, most organizations recruit a number of people, in fairly generous percentages at the entry level. And then somewhere in the middle, there's a huge drop. And as a result, the pipeline with which you're kind of hiring at the top, becomes really, really narrow and in many cases inadequate. What do you feel are things, if you had no constraints, what are some of those things you would do?
To kind of make the pipeline more robust.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So I think the first thing I'd do is most organizations have a very templated approach to filling roles, right? If you have to be a team leader, then you must have had ABC experiences and X number of years and worked in X number of locations, etc. I think it's time to relook at that template because maybe that belonged to a different world, a different set of circumstances, whatever. So,
Right.
if we want to bring diversity, yeah, not just in gender, but in thought and approach and so on, you've got to do away with some of those templates. So that means going a lot more on gut, on qualitative assessment, giving people opportunities, taking bets on unlikely people, and so on. Yeah. So I think if we changed our attitude to hiring and filling roles, yeah,
Hmm.
and our qualifiers for doing that, it would help hugely in kind of building a more robust pipeline. Because when you look at it, many women, given the years they've got to take out for natural things like having children, bringing up children, taking care of families, etc. They probably lose out on some of these conventional you know roles and so on, but they're more than capable of being successful in the roles if we could only look at it differently. So to me, that's a big factor in bringing more women into more credible women and more diverse women pipeline.
One of the things I sort of, when you look at, having more women in technology, for instance, one of the things that they're trying to do is to get, obviously, widen the talent pool. The women who code kind of initiatives are doing that. But one of the things I often wonder is because you don't see enough number of women in functions such as sales or finance, which have traditionally been the route to go to the CEO position. Is that something that would make a difference? If we take more women in these functions, it would make a difference that way. Would you say that?
It could be. For instance, why don't
Kim,
we
Kim, can
have
I interrupt for half a second? Kim, you can you move a little more to the center of the screen, please? It's sort of I'm getting a comment. Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, this is great. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead. Please continue.
Yeah, so to continue your train of thought, we have a lot of very influential and impactful HR leaders, but we don't have that many HR leaders who, in a conventional sense, make it to the CEO role. Now, why is that so? Is it because it's obviously not because organizations value people and people's skills lower or less. It could be because we are used to people technology background, a finance background with more quantitative skills taking top jobs. So that itself could be a kind of resetting of what we expect from the CEO. Yeah. So yeah, that's just one kind of alternative to thinking.
If you talk to me a little bit about your own journey, starting with, the kind of work that you did, what were some of those experiences that have added up and sort of qualified you for the kind of roles that you're doing today? What are some of those really defining experiences you would say? And just if you could just briefly talk to me through those, starting with your lever stint.
I think I would, pick a few stints for building functional knowledge and pick a few others for building skills like influencing skills and some obviously for leadership. Yeah. And for me, I think all three are important. The ratio of the three obviously keep changing as you move forward in your career. Yeah. And in the latter part, the leadership experience obviously weighed in more. Influencing is something that stays with you through your life and not just in your career. And as finance professionals, we're very often in an influencing position as well as in an executive position. So, and functional skill building is obviously the foundational, and it's the start of the journey, if I could put it that way. And I think all three have played their respective parts and have been very important in my career journey.
So when you think about influencing skills, give me an example of a time when you faced that kind of a scenario and that sort of important lesson learned how to influence. Is there something that would come top of the mind for you?
So I remember when I was an executive assistant to a CEO, and we were doing an important restructuring project. And I felt very passionately about something, and I was in a complete minority. And obviously, everybody who was in that decision making group was many levels my senior, because obviously
Sure.
as like assistant. But I said to myself that I would have a good shot at trying to cut a few of the opinion leaders just because I felt passionately about it. So I fully leveraged the meeting before the meeting, the sidelines, personal relationships, and so on, just to get my thoughts across. And as happened, the proposal I had went through. It obviously got modified in the process, but it went through. And the while I saw that as a big plus, I fully understood that it wasn't the proposal itself; it was the ownership of the proposal by the different decision makers and the opportunity for them to put their stamp on it, which was the difference between the proposal going through and not. It was not just me.
So building allies, and building relationships and networks across obviously seems to matter. We have a question here from Vijaya Rangaswamy, and question is, how often do you personally pick a woman talent to groom in senior manager roles? Is there something that you can talk about?
Yes, I would say as often as I possibly can. And the only things that I look for are is the woman keen on doing this role, whichever role that she fancies. Has she identified the areas where she would like support? Yeah, and is she willing to work with me or any coach of her choice to get there? And so, as always, the keenness to get there and the willingness to invest in learning and development to get there are the two big things for me. And if both are a yes, I'd be very happy to back the candidature of the board.
And one question would be that how do you sort of identify opportunities to give the person exposure to multiple dimensions that the person is going to need in the next role, not in the current role. The current role, the person is hopefully doing well, which is why you've picked the person. But how do you sort of do that?
In the course of a year or a cycle, there's so many opportunities for people to put their hands up to work on projects you know on things they fancy, which are not just business as usual. You could just say, "Hey, this looks interesting. Can I chase this up? And can I, wrestle this problem to the ground? Can I be part of this global project?" Can I do a bubble assignment for 3-4 months in a different location? Yeah, it's just that little extra interest, curiosity, willingness to invest in doing something a little different, still allied to what your day job is, over and above. Yeah. And you can always identify that spark, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think for me, one of the things is the person's ability to sort of not give up when they fail at something and to persist. I think people give up way too faster, and that if you look at a lot of people who have achieved tremendous success, a lot of it has to do with the fact that the person has really sharpened that particular skill and not said, okay, that's not for me, which is typically how the average person does it. You give it a try, it didn't work, well, I give it up. um, the second thing I personally look for is just complete comfort with feedback, which is not necessarily appreciative. It's very easy to take, somebody says, "Oh, you're fantastic." I don't think anybody has a problem receiving that, but being comfortable with that, things which are not working well, without getting demoralized or completely heartbroken and saying that, oh my god, it's hard to work with this leader. I think that to me is another sign of person destined for a greater role later. That's what I would say. I have a different kind of a question for you, that you've done roles at sort of a really at the early stages of your career, which are far more geographically more confined. Then you've done country level roles, you've done Asia Pac roles, and then you've done global roles. What changes in each one of them from a soft skills point of view? What are the things that change? Or if you can give me examples even from finance, that'll be great, because we do have people who are from that.
Yeah. I think the cultural context is very important. What people say, what people mean, and what is acceptable challenge, what's acceptable as an ask. Yeah. So for me, this whole thing of boundaryless work days, which we Indians are kind of very almost proud to embrace. Yeah, I'm available anytime to my boss, to my teammates, to my colleagues. Yeah, some of us say it, some of us live it, but basically, we're always on the phone. Yeah, and we're always in meetings. We're always busy. Yeah, so in my first job abroad, I called my boss. I think it was at about 6:30 in the evening. It was summer, so it was bright sunshine outside. But I called him at 6:30, and he said, "Kim, is this urgent?" I said, "Yeah, reasonably." He said, "I'm standing on the roof of my house. I'm trying to figure out what's wrong with the gutter pipe leading from the roof. So if it's a matter of life or death, I'll come down and answer it. Otherwise, it can surely wait till tomorrow morning." So it was the first time that anybody had prioritized a non-work thing before a work thing in
Sure.
my life. So I mean, it was just it was a very simple appearance, but it was a bit of an aha to me that people do have a life outside of work, and there are specific work hours. And if it is seriously not a matter of life or death, it can wait till the start of the next work day. So it could be something as simple as that. It could be more nuanced, but people are different, cultures are different. Of course, we might be moving towards a very global, cosmopolitan, almost unidentifiably global culture, but there are differences and nuances everywhere.
Is it harder to build the company culture in an environment like this, where everybody is on a Zoom call? Is it tougher? And what are you doing to, so let's say, talk about the values of the organization. How do you live it in a world where the only thing you have in front of you is the video?
Yeah, we all miss those. On the one hand, there are our sessions with 200, 300 people, and a feeling of belonging and all of that. And we also miss those one-on-ones where you can look somebody in the eye and say, "This is what it is," and build a kind of rapport. We miss both the large gatherings and the one-on-ones. But the Zoom calls aren't too bad, are they? And have I lost you again?
No, no, no. I'm right there. Continue. Sorry. Please continue.
Okay. So I was saying the Zoom calls aren't too bad because if you take our situation, we wouldn't have been able to have this chat unless we were physically proximate, which is not the case today. So I think
Sure.
both challenges and opportunities.
And when you think about your own, the choices that you made when you sort of when opportunities have come your way, are there things that you've chosen to say no to, even though everybody else would have thought them to be fabulous opportunities? If so, what kind of opportunities were they?
Um, I think I've prioritized depending upon the stage of that I was in. I have passed by quite a few opportunities, which at a different point in time I'd have been very happy to take. But at the time they came along, either family was a priority or location was a tough one. So I let them pass. I also remember a couple of jobs that I've taken which didn't make sense to a number of people, but for me it was personal learning. And it was also a personal challenge because it took me out of my comfort zone.
Give me an
So,
example of that.
um, so uh, I remember once when we had acquired a business. There was a project role going for combining two sales systems. Yeah, obviously I was in finance. Finance is proximate to many operations and including sales. But I never actually worked in sales. So I said I would take that up. Uh, and it was a 6 months project, and there was no immediate visibility to the role after that. But I was quite happy to do it because I didn't see myself getting an opportunity to actually work in sales. Uh, so I did put up my hand, and it was a great learning experience for me. It was an odd choice at that point in time for a finance person, and many people thought I was playing ducks and drakes with my career. But I was very happy to do it, and even in retrospect, I'm very happy that I did it.
And is there a career stint or a choice that you made which you now, looking back, it didn't quite value add to you, and maybe you could have bypass that. Is there anything like that?
Yeah, I remember there was one role I took because it was at it gave me a promotion, but I took the role, didn't particularly enjoy it, and I do look at it as a year and a half in that role, which was, according to me, time which could have been spent better. So again, it's one of those Aesop's fables kind of thing. Do not accept a role just because it gives you a better title and better money. So, yeah, everything's a learning experience, right? One way or the other, good or bad.
For a moment, I thought you were going to say Aesop as in ESOP, Aesop fables, and that that the Aesop drove the decision, and therefore it just sort of worked well. Um, when you look at the kind of role that you're doing, which spans multiple countries, what are some of the things that if somebody is going to move into that kind of a role, what are some of the pieces of advice you would give to someone like that?
Well, I think fundamentally you have to enjoy a role which is a portfolio one rather than a fully operating one. And you also have to be comfortable with width and not just depth. It's a combination of both. And you've got to be, handy with the in and out. Yeah. Dip into a problem, rip out, move on to the next thing. Yeah, while having a fair appreciation of the depth as well. So, if you enjoy that kind of job, then you should sign up for these regional and global roles. If you'd rather be much closer to the on the ground operations, and what gives you your adrenaline rush, then you should stick with that.
Now, what is the most common mistake that people make when it comes to career choices?
I think people are swung too much by title, money, and what people think, um, until they reach a stage of self awareness and say that this is not for me, yeah, or this is kind of hyped up way more than it's worth. And this is what I really enjoy. It might mean a more sober pace, a lesser title or lesser money or whatever it is, but this is what I truly enjoy, where I add value, where I keep learning. I think to find the right space, yeah, in your head and your heart about what you enjoy doing and what you really feel makes it all worthwhile. I think that is something that comes after a little bit of time. Of course, you could be wise and hit on that straight away, but with all of us, it takes a little bit of.
You've worked, consistently across three terrific organizations: Unilever, PepsiCo, and now Kimberly-Clark. All of it in the same sector, which is consumer goods, or CPG, as they say in US. Now, do you feel that you should have perhaps experimented with more sectors, or do you really enjoy? What is it about the consumer goods industry that you like so much?
Well, it just makes you feel very close to the consumer. Yeah, you could argue that if you worked in Google or Amazon, the experience is similar. But here, these are real articles of real consumption used by real people. Yeah, so you kind of relate to it, you relate to the product, you relate to the consumer, you feel that you understand different facets of the operation, right from the sourcing to the consumption. So you just feel very close to business, or at least that's what's kept me engaged and going.
Yeah, I think the ability to sort of understand how those tastes are shifting, and what are some of those there's those minor innovations that keep happening on far more. They are like little sparklers you see going all over the place. So I've that's what I've enjoyed about my time in CPG. Not as much as you have spent so many years, but for the little time that I spent, I think it was great fun. There's a question that's come from Suresh Narayan. Okay, all right. Um, one of the things Suresh is sort of saying that it's great to see both of us, old friend. But I there's a question from Rajendra which says, "How do you handle failure, and how have you dealt with failure in your personal scenario?"
Oh, of course, all of us have faced failure, and I would say I've obviously had my share. I think we all go through a cycle, right? You first feel down, and then you get into analytical mode of what went wrong, and then you try and fix it, and then you rise and shine. So I guess that's the cycle I've also gone through. And I would love to say that I've never made the same mistake twice. I can't claim that also, but maybe I've taken less of a fall the next time around if it's the same mistake. That's the only thing I can claim.
So in that cycle, you talked about, you would sort of feel bad, then you would analyze it, then you try and fix it, and then you bounce back. Between fixing and bouncing back emotionally, what is your method of doing that? How do you do it?
Well, I guess in many instances, just telling yourself that it's going to be fine. Yeah, in almost uh, a sense of you've just got to kind of induce a sense of optimism. Yeah, it's like those humor clubs. If you keep laughing, then at some point you're going to feel really happy, right? It's an artificially induced laugh, but maybe the endorphins or serotonins or whatever are released, and you end up feeling happy. So similarly, you keep telling yourself it's going to be okay and it's fine and so on, and you end up being more optimistic.
So, so the one solution could be to go and watch sitcom if you enjoy sitcom, that is, then, potentially go for that. Um, One of the questions coming from Pradeep Joshi is there discrimination for C-level women executives to reach the topmost position as a CEO? Do you see that there is, uh, and it may be different for different organizations, but is that something that you can do anything about? What would you advise? How does one deal with that?
I guess there
Should
is
one
some
stay
level.
and fight, or should you stay and fight, or do you just change the stage?
There's some level of unconscious bias, but I have to say that there is now so much of a consciousness of encouraging women, of recognizing the value of diversity and so on, that most enlightened organizations, uh, you don't have to really fight to get to the corner office. Yeah, and I think if you keep focusing on talent, on your talent, I mean, and your ability to do a role, any role that comes your way in your journey to the C suite, I think you'll get there.
Um, we are coming up towards the end of the hour. I just wanted to ask you, when you read the book Dreamers and Unicorns, is there a particular section that resonated with you?
No, I liked your theories on the future of work and how that whole piece was going to evolve, the S curves and so on. So, would you like to kind of expand a bit on what got you thinking along those lines?
No, just, I think for me it was about noticing. I wrote the previous one, which is called The Digital Tsunami. It was about how do you, to really talk about the shifts that were happening. And this was really, what do you do about it? Because just saying that this is a shift. And therefore, I found that leadership, talent, and culture, really the ones who get it right, have a combination of these. And you've been part of such organizations. Some of them, are referenced there. There's a big reference to Unilever's method of sort of identifying talent, etc. So yes, totally get that. But I know that in Singapore, it is like getting close to 10:30 at night, um, and it's way past your bedtime. I know that, but thank you ever so much, Kim. It is always such a delight. I'm always amazed at how much you are able to pack in into every answer that you've given. Lots of things to think about. The questions are, responses are still coming in, but hopefully, we'll get back to you once again at some point of time to talk about more stuff. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks for having me, Abhijit. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. And good luck with Dreamers and Unicorns.
Thank you.